Welcome to Reflections, Monday's short-form studio feature ahead of Friday's Photo Walk podcast. Thoughtful observations on creativity and, well, just life really. You'll find all 5 of this week's reflections on our Patreon channel, The Extra Mile. Marsha. I pulled into the car park a little early. This crematorium was new territory for me, out of my usual patch of Berkshire, a little closer to the outskirts of London, though that line is becoming increasingly flexible. When you start writing final tributes for people, the requests stay reasonably neatly within your postcode. But then, and within a shorter time period than I was personally expecting, my mileage from home has expanded to follow the currents of relationships. A friend asks, then a friend of a friend, then someone who heard me speak for a relative and hopes I might do the same for theirs. Before I knew it, I'm starting to travel into corners of the shires I've not visited, carrying a folder and a promise I hope to keep well for all those who've trusted me in their services. Last November was where this all began. My friend, and ours of course, on the podcast, the respected photojournalist Jason Florio, had asked me to photograph his mother's funeral and record the sound as family members spoke. To some, this sort of commission may seem an unusual one, but photographing grief isn't as strange as people assume. Families have told me following the occasion that they barely remember the day. Emotion almost certainly blurs the memory of such an event, unsurprisingly. Photographs return something that might otherwise slip away, and in many ways, this is really what I speak of in terms of photographing a wedding. It's said that weddings and funerals are the 2 most common times family all come together under one roof. I remember that day, standing there with a camera at Jason's mother's funeral, watching the celebrant, Colin, guide everyone through the service for my friend's mother. Independent celebrants are or have a particular kind of presence. They're not religious clergy, they're not registrars, nothing ceremonial or overtly official, just human beings. I think that just human beings thing works very well with a family at a moment when thoughtful and knowing kindness matters more than anything else. Colin had a way with words that carried a knowledge that's only really learned by spending time, finding out about a family and how the loss has left a mark. Colin's service, Colin's words and Colin's tribute stayed with me long after I drove home. I realised that day his work wasn't a million miles, as they say, from the storytelling I already love. His words, his thoughts, planted a thought. Maybe I could do that. Maybe I could use words in the same way that I've used a camera to focus, if you'll pardon the photographic pun, memory. So a year later, here I am in a suit that really has become the funeral suit, if that doesn't sound too final, turning up at chapels and crematoria with a folder of original pages ready to speak for families who trust me with their stories. And in an unexpected echo of last year, Jason was the photographer for this most recent funeral. Roles most definitely reversed, but definitely fitting as well. The same person who once asked me to witness and record his mother's goodbye was now photographing a service I was leading. Our mutual friend, Jeremy, had asked us to work together, each of us doing what felt right in our own creative lane. But all this, within this story, comes after the first moment of the morning, which was the car park. I pulled in and immediately eyeballed a small Suzuki van parked beneath a canvas awning. Under that was a camping table lined with cakes and packets of crisps and so on. At the back of the van, the hatch was open and inside were 2 full coffee machines. The whole setup felt like stumbling across a tiny coffee festival. It was tucked into a corner of a place where No, I just wouldn't expect a festival at all. This was the car park of a crematorium. But that was how I met Marsha. Marsha and her husband Jeff had left the corporate world behind them and now run a small fleet of charming coffee vehicles. Vintage buses, tuk-tuks, and my favourite, electric milk floats. I mean, those early morning icons used to glide down our streets before sunrise, clinking glass bottles into crates and being chased enthusiastically by neighbourhood dogs. They're relics of a slower time, and seeing one repurposed for coffee feels like somebody's found a way to bottle nostalgia and caffeine all at the same time. It's December the 1st, so will you forgive a little Dickensian ghost of Christmas past? In this case, the ghost is, well, the Express Dairy's milk float driver. The milk float turned up in all weathers, even snow, as used to be the case in the Shires. I remember the float for various reasons. It was the thing that broke the quiet of a cul-de-sac on said white Christmas mornings. The only thing that left early morning tracks. It was piloted by this chap we cruelly called, we being the kids, the moany old milkman, on account of the fact he only ever really complained. I can't deliver to your house today. You didn't pay your bill. You left your car too far over in the driveway for me to get past. I won't be delivering today. I couldn't read your writing because the rain washed your ink away. I won't be delivering today. He moaned about everything, and then moaned about people who moaned back. Peter Cheeseman, at number 9, in his early teens, was an absolute local hero for once jumping in the electric milk cart that the moany old milkman owned and driving it halfway up the cul-de-sac before crashing it into a parked Vauxhall Viva. Anyway, back to the Suzuki coffee van in the crematorium car park Marsha and Jeff run as a mobile coffee unit. Their business is called Tiger Lily, and Marsha, standing there on this brisk November morning, hands wrapped around a cup she had just made for somebody, had that quality of real, honest, I care about you conversation. Some people carry a natural openness with them, and Marsha, I can tell you this, is definitely one of those. I was intrigued by their story, Marsha and Jeff, and how the Suzuki coffee mobile had ended up there, in a car park you might not expect such, well, niceties. From morning to late afternoon, people come and go. Families saying goodbye. Funeral directors, pallbearers, ground staff, drivers, and people like me and Jason. This place is in constant movement, one way or another. And here's the reason I'm penning this piece 900, maybe 1,000 words in or so, easily over halfway. Marsha said something that's stayed with me now for 4 or 5 days. Sometimes, she said, people just need to talk. And sometimes, well, I'm that person. It wasn't said with any form of drama, darling. It was reasonably casual as it goes. People step out of chapels holding more than just the order of service. Grief, shock, relief sometimes, guilt, exhaustion. All those feelings and more. It all arrives differently for every single person. Some just want silence. Some want distraction. And some want 5 minutes with a stranger who won't ask anything of them. And Marsha sees that. She pours coffee, she passes it across, and then she listens. She said it felt like she was, well, meant to be there. That this job, this conversation, and being a steady voice or ear in a place where emotions definitely rise and fall, made absolute sense to her. And I believe Marsha. Some people land exactly where they're supposed to, without ever planning it, without really knowing it. On the drive home, thinking about Marsha, she reminded me of the, if you pardon the expression, elderly woman that I've met recently in Newbury, and I'm embarrassed for not knowing her name, but she sits near my house every December on a junction, just close to where I walk Barney. A big hat, thick coat, a walker with a small sign tied to the front that simply reads, "Merry Christmas." She parks herself at the roadside like a seasonal beacon, and people park their cars in a nearby lay-by. They hand her sticky buns and coffees, gifts they pick up on their way through town, particularly sometimes making a journey out of their way to go and see her. And they chat, and that creates a feeling. And I think Marsha, in her own way, does very much the same. And coffee seems to be a common thread. As we edge toward the end of the year, and I'm not trying to make this sound like a thought for the day, but when everything becomes a little more reflective and people, stroke I, stroke we, carry the stories and the feelings and the weight of the months that are behind us, I keep thinking about what I'm going to call Marsha's car park. In particular, how easy it is to estimate the impact of small connections we make. And often that's with our cameras. We talk a lot on this show about being of service. It can sound all very grand when it isn't really. Sometimes, with our cameras, it's simply showing up and listening and making space or indeed time for people. And I know, after chatting with Marsha, it's all about putting a warm drink into the hands of somebody who needs it far more than they realise.